action at the feature table has been folded around to Antonio Esfandiari in the cutoff. He raises with the pocket deuces, makes it 10,000 total.
This raise is a little more reasonable.
Ivey with 8-5 of spades will call on the button. Mike Watson folds the small blind, and Daniel Alive folds the big blind. So these two old school pros playing heads up once again. Ivey pairs his 5, Esfandiari has a set.
If any of you at home want to know how to win tournaments for $18 million, this is how you do it. Antonio should be able to c-bet with pure joy.
He does bet 14,000.
Ivey's caught that piece, so I doubt he's folding.
Ivey's raising. 38,000 total.
This is pure Ivey trying to boss Antonio. Only problem is nobody bosses Antonio when he's got a set on a really dry board. And he knows Phil's pretty likely to be messing around with not much that will get him action on another raise.
He does just call.
I think this is the time for that truck backing up sound effect. You know,
We don't have that.
Can we have that? Can someone please?
I'm sure you haven't heard it because we didn't find it.
Maybe we found it.
We didn't search the internet for that.
Anyway, we need to back up for a moment and talk about what the heck is happening here. Why is Phil deciding to raise in a spot that is traditionally a really straightforward call, one would think anyway, by pretty much everybody?
I think Hardigan and Stapes are not incensed enough by this raise. Stapleton said something along the lines of, well, Ivey's never going to fold on this flop when he flops a 5.
Right.
But he doesn't expect Ivey to raise. See, then Hardigan says something about him trying to boss on Esfandiari. Maybe Stapes said it. One of the guys said it. I don't know what's going on there because that's usually when you're just purely bluffing. Ivey has a hand of value. This is a strange, peculiar raise, and if it was anybody but Ivey, we would immediately dismiss it as terrible, I'm sure.
I'm sure we would, but let's give it a shot.
Let's give it a shot.
See if we can justify this. So one thing that may happen with Phil raises here is he might fold out some better hands some of the time, right?
I mean, we have to kind of discover what is Phil's intent with this raise. Because if we can't figure out his intent, it's just random button clicking, right?
Yep.
So one thing that we came to in our podcast that's possible, at least we hope, is Phil is thinking this raise has two things that happen that are good for us, right?
Okay.
Sometimes we fold out pocket 6s through pocket queens because they're in a very tough spot for the rest of the hand.
Yeah.
So we don't have to just hero against those hands and lose in the end because that's a lot of combos of hands. So we get to win against those hands. That's pretty cool. Also, we get to fold out all the random queen-jack type hands that have value against us eventually some of the time. We don't want them to reach their equity, right?
Yeah.
So we get to get rid of those hands. I guess that's nice, right?
I mean, that's cool. You could also make the case we're raising an amount that we would have called on the turn anyway, at least some turns, not all turns, right? Some turns are going to come, we're just going to fold if Antonio bets again. But so that way it sort of costs us about the same anyway.
Right.
Maybe.
But it's not really a value raise.
It's not.
Yeah, it's a very strange raise, and we came up with these reasons, but they're all just like stretches to try to justify a Phil Ivey play because it's Phil Ivey.
It's Phil.
Yeah.
It's Ivey.
It's
Phil
both.
Ivey.
And I say Phil Ivey a lot. I know that.
You do.
We've mentioned that on the podcast.
Nothing wrong with that, though.
So in general, I mean, we can boil it down to its normal terms, just saying this raise is not a normal raise because you don't usually expect to get called by a worse hand, and you don't usually expect to fold out that many better hands.
I mean, and you can't, as Phil, be thinking, I'm going to put pressure on king-queen here and try and fold that out later.
No.
He's not trying to turn his hand into a bluff, or he shouldn't be. He's got too much value for that.
He can't expect Antonio to be folding a king yet.
Right, and if we look at Antonio now, so Antonio's been raised, and the question becomes, what is Antonio supposed to do? He's got a very strong hand.
Right, a lot of people would be tempted to raise here.
Right, however, and there's a big however, what is Phil repping for value? Let's think about it. Really strong hands, like pocket 5s, pocket deuces. We know we can't have that, but still. Once in a while, pocket kings. It's hard to come up with a two-pair hand that Phil's going to have.
Right, maybe deuce 5 suited or king 5 suited sometimes, but that's rare. It seems like Phil has a lot of bluffs here based on the dryness of this board, and the value that Phil has is usually sets.
And we're losing because we got the worst set.
Yeah.
So putting in a raise here is often going to fold out all the bluffs that we'd want to continue to give us action.
Right.
And the sets are obviously never going to fold, and so we're just going to double him up, and it's going to suck for us.
Right, so there doesn't seem to be too much value in raising. Even if Phil is doing an Ivey thing and has a hand like he does, that's going to fold if we put in another bet anyway.
For sure.
So calling makes a lot of sense, and we think it's definitely the best play. Before we get back to the action, I got a question for you. Do you want to play with the poker guys?
Yeah.
Do you know where to play with the poker guys?
No.
Where do you play with the poker guys, Jonathan?
Dunno.
Nitrogen Sports Poker Room is where you play with the poker guys, where we're hosting sit and goes, where we're going to Twitch them live. You can play with us and be on our Twitch stream.
I mean, that's pretty cool. Also, use all this information we talk about against us.
Right.
That's pretty cool.
That's a good idea. You should do that.
I mean, you really should.
Use the link in the description when you sign up for Nitrogen for access to exclusive Poker Guys tournaments, and definitely check out Nitrogen and see us on Twitch playing on there.
Don't forget, they also have lightning fast withdrawals, 10 to 25 minutes. The money is in your pocket.
Got 100,000 in the middle. Jack of hearts on the turn.
Still just a very small range beating Antonio, most of which would have re-raised him before the flop. Would be weird for him to do anything but check to the razor here.
Phil Ivey now drawing dead. He checks behind.
He was really hoping Phil would fire there.
9 of clubs on the river.
Antonio's going to have the best hand here like 99% of the time, so let's see how much value he goes for. I don't think he'll be able to get much out of Phil at all. Maybe nothing.
He bets just over half the pot, 58,000.
Phil's not insta-folding. Weird.
He only has a pair of 5s.
Ivey would have to think that Antonio is mostly playing this way with a lot of baby aces if he's at all thinking about making a call here. Wait. Maybe he's thinking about raising, repping the old queen 10 with the old queen high raise on the flop. Nope, that's probably not it either. He's actually thinking about a call. Wow.
He has counted out the 58,000.
Philip Horatio Ivey did know what a POW, payoff wizard, was before today's show even started, and now he wants to become one. He's going to get away from this.
He calls!
Wow. Welcome to Magician v. Wizard. Magician wins.
Okay, I hope we found that truck backing up sound in the interim, because holy moly, we got to stop everything and talk about what just happened.
It was too much of the budget for the truck backing up
That
sound.
is expensive stuff.
Couldn't afford the truck
The
backing up sound.
royalties.
It's expensive stuff. All right, Phil Ivey, what's going on here? Okay, so when we first watched this, admittedly, we both looked at each other and thought, that's maybe the worst thing I've ever seen Phil Ivey do. This is horrible, right? So obviously we did a long podcast on this. We thought about it a lot. We still aren't totally on board with how Phil played the hand, but we have some thoughts that could make it okay, maybe if the lighting is like perfect on his face like this at the right time of day and the universe that's over there.
Yeah, like he has to come out of the hole, not see his shadow, go back in, and then it's like, okay, for 6 weeks to make this call, basically.
Right.
That's what we're down to.
Yeah, it's tough, but it's not as bad as it initially looks.
Right.
Let's break it down into bluffs and value. That's what we got to do here. Antonio has, clearly he's going to have some bluffs here. He's going to have some value here. Sure. Ivey doesn't have a very good hand, though.
No, he doesn't.
No, he doesn't. So what is Antonio's value?
Okay, well, he's certainly got all the sets, which he can have, clearly.
Yeah.
He can have deuces, fives, kings. He can also, by the way, have jacks and nines sometimes.
Yeah, but not all of the time, but some of them.
Sometimes he may call that raise with jacks and nines, sometimes not. But by now, he would have realized a set from both of those every time he calls.
Right.
So he can have all that. He can have the big 2 pair of hands also. He can have king jack. He can have king 9 for sure.
He definitely has all of those.
Yes.
So those are all of his slam dunk value. We're sure he can show up with those hands. The question marks we have are ace king, king queen, king 10, those types of hands.
Right.
We think ace king is very likely to be a bet. Not as sure. We kind of disagreed a bit.
We did disagree, in
Yeah.
fact.
Jonathan thinks for sure king 10 and king queen are betting as Antonio.
I think king queen for sure and king 10 probably.
I'm not so convinced on
He's
that.
not.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But if you want to hear more about that, listen to our podcast. Anyway, in the end, if we kind of do a little amalgamation of that, it comes out to around 38 combos of value. You can see them on your screen here.
Yeah.
So that's what Antonio has for value. That's a lot of hands.
It is.
It's a problem for Phil. So now we have to come up with bluffs if we're going to make this call.
Right.
Can we?
We can come up with bluffs. I'm just not sure if they're truly justified. So the bluffs we can come up with are, we have to think back. Antonio called a raise on the flop and is bluffing now. What can he have? Well, he's certainly 3-4 suited. Makes all the sense.
That's the one that we think he has 100% of the 3-4 suiteds.
Yes.
But that's only 4 combos.
Not too much.
Yeah.
Ace 3 and ace 4. I think he can open ace 3 and ace 4 offsuit.
Yeah.
C-bet on this board. I expect him to do that.
Yep.
And then call this raise. At least some of the time you're deep. I know you're out of position, but if you make your straight, Phil's repping a really strong hand here. We got a chance to stack that guy. Also, our ace might be good some of the time too. seems reasonable to call on this small a raise when we're this deep, even though we're out of position. I'm not sure he's actually calling, but I think it's at least very reasonable. We're 75 blinds deep.
Yeah, it is definitely reasonable, but that's what we have to get to. We have to get to Antonio calls with those hands and then decides to bluff with those hands.
That's the other half.
And if we give him all of those, you'll see on your screen, that's going to come to 36 combos.
So it's no
that means
problem.
it's a slam dunk call for Phil, right? But we can't, in the real world, give him all of those combos, where we for sure can give him all of those value combos as played.
Right.
So how low does it go, though? Like, how many combos is it really? I think we can only give him 4 for sure.
Right.
The 3-4 suiteds. The rest of it's really questionable.
I mean, Phil checked the turn, which looks like, if he's not just screwing around on the flop, has a showdownable hand that is planning to call on the river, right? That's how you play those hands, right? Like, I have a king, you called the raise. Okay, fine, I'm going to call the river now. So is Antonio really going to bluff that often?
I don't know.
With his ace highs, which might be good sometimes, might even decide to check call sometimes if Phil has got air. I don't know if he's really going to, but Phil either has a very strong hand in theory, or he's got nothing. Right?
He's got nothing.
Bump kiss.
Yeah, in the end, it comes down to math a little bit, but it's such subjective math. We have to give Antonio 13 combos of bluffs because Phil's getting 3-1. So Antonio has to have 13 combos of bluffs to justify this call. And I'm not sure if we can really come up with Antonio calling with ace-4 and ace-3 on the flop and then bluffing them also, because he could be winning some of the time with his ace-highs against Phil's bluffy range. He could check call with those hands. Of course, with 4-high, he has to bet to get Phil off of his bluffs.
Right. So 4-high is definitely doing it, but as we said, that's only 4 combos. By the way, there's a second interesting question about this river play, which is, should Antonio be betting here at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question, but I think in the end, look what Phil Ivey shows up with here.
Yeah.
He can have a lot of hands that you don't expect most players to have. You're Antonio, you have a really big hand. You just want to make sure a bet goes in on the river because this guy's hard to range, and I just hope he calls.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, if you check it back, that blows for me. I'm going to put a bet in. Maybe we'll induce a raise once in a while.
Maybe.
It's Phil. He does weird stuff.
Raise wouldn't be that comfortable, by the way.
It wouldn't be comfortable. We're going to have to close our eyes and call after Phil checks the turn. What are we actually losing to now? A weirdly played pocket 9s and queen 10, a completely
Set of 5s that he might sometimes check back the turn with.
and then move in on the river?
Yeah, it's possible.
It's possible. Well, we're just going to lose. We were just going to lose that anyway, though. We were just screwed on
That's
those
not the
hands
big
anyway.
key. The big key is should Phil call here.
Yeah.
We think we can justify it if we use all of our special math here.
Like Magic Eye, where you like if
But
you
in
put
the
the
end-
paper like just the right distance from your face, you can see the spaceship.
Yes, like that.
Like that.
But in the end, it's just too much to really get here and actually give Antonio all of those combos, so it feels a little spewy.
Yeah, we don't love it.
Yep. All right, people. Are we stretching, even though we said it was bad, are we stretching too much to give Phil Ivey credit here? Is this just completely horrible, or are we wrong? Is this actually good by Phil Ivey? Is that possible?
Defend your Phil.
Yeah, if you want to comment on it and we'll respond to them. Click right up there. If it's not there, it's coming soon.
We have done so many hands featuring Phil Ivey, almost all of them, by the way, with us falling over backward praising his play, because it's really extraordinary in most of these hands.
Yeah.
If you want to check out all of them or just a few choice ones, click right up here.
Yeah, and also make sure you check out our podcast. If you didn't think we went into enough detail, and in this one, a lot of detail is needed, and there was stuff we glossed over because there's so much to talk about here. Check out this podcast. We talk about it forever. It'll last the rest of your life.
Well, no.
Make sure you subscribe to the podcast.
Yeah, it's a lie, though. It's 44 minutes, which
Yeah.
is still a lot, right? And of course, if you like this video, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel.